Back in the 1970s, we used to have programs that were called defined benefit plans. Suddenly in 1974, with the act of ERISA, we created the opening for what was called a defined contribution plan. What we want you to understand on Consider This program is that those defined contribution plans really should be known as defined distribution plans. Well, good morning and welcome to Consider This program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Daren Hardesty.
So happy to have you all along. Hey, we are going to talk about one of the two things that really drives me and is fueling, I've done this for 32 years and very, very honored to serve more than 1,000 families. And, at the time of this recording, a little over $600 million that we manage for families across the country. It's a true honor. But the two things that drive me, one of which is helping people understand you always want to begin with the end in mind. And many people have defined contribution plans. My argument is that it really is a defined distribution plan, that your money will exit. You will exit either when you choose to pull the money out, when the IRS forces you to pull the money out, or when you pass away and your heirs have to take the money out. I'm going to turn this over to Daren and let him explain a little bit about how that works. So, Daren, what types of accounts are deemed defined contribution plans?
Pretty much any account, 401ks.
That's the Mac Daddy.
That's the Mac Daddy. 403Bs for those government workers, school employees, nurses, 403Bs. Any account where you are allowed to put pre-tax dollars in while working. What that means is when you put any money into those accounts that never hits your tax return, you're never taxed on those dollars until you decide to take it out. Now,
if I put money in a Roth 401k, I'm paying the taxes. Is that not still a defined contribution?
That's a very good question.
And the answer is yes.
Yes, it would be, because you're still putting your income in.
You're still putting your money. So it's not just that, but you hit the big ones, right? The 401k is the Mac Daddy. And then the 403B is for not-for-profit entities.
Correct.
Right. So as a former school teacher, that's what you had and where it went. So tell me how it works. You have a 401k at the Financial Enhancement Group. Tell me about its journey. What's going to happen with it?
Well, I'm going to be putting money in consistently. Okay. Most companies will offer some kind of match to the amount that you put in. So that money is going to be growing. Everything that goes in there, it's not been taxed unless it's in the Roth side, but everything's going to grow. Everything's going to be, doing its thing. You're going to have it invested, and God willing, by the time you retire, you have, let's say, $1 million in that account at the end of your working journey. You feel good about yourself. You've got $1 million in there. You feel like you've done the heavy lifting, but now you're going to get to a point where you need to start taking those dollars out, and that's when the IRS comes back to say, all right, every one of these dollars that you put in pre-tax, it's time for you to pay us.
Plus the growth.
Right. So it is a wonderful thing. And it's something that I think a lot of people have taken advantage of, obviously. And like you said many times, not many people, when they set up 401k plans, expected to have $1 million plus accounts the way that we have. But people obviously caught on. So what's the tricky part, and as we're going to get into this next step, is once you get to the end of your journey, what do you do with that money? And a lot of people don't want to touch it because, like you've said many times, it's their baby. They'd take it to Thanksgiving dinner if they could, pull up a seat at the table for them. Other people, they don't need the money because they have other sources of income, so they just don't really think about pulling it. So most people end up not taking it until they're forced to, which is now when they're 72 years old. And that could stay that number, but it could fluctuate depending on the tax code. But at that 72, whatever your account's grown to, there's going to be a required minimum distribution that you are forced to take out depending on the amount in the account and your life expectancy.
So this is the challenge, guys. And I'm going to say what Daren said again, just so you can hear it twice, because I think it is so critical, right? You're going to go through 3 phases of finance in your life, right? Daren's got 3 little kids. They're a young family, right? And they are in the accumulation mode. They are diligently putting money in the accounts, paying off debt, doing all the things that most of us did when we were their age, right? I had 2 young kids at that time. Where you're just trying to do the best you can, but you and Morgan are saving so that you have a better future.
Correct.
Now, eventually, those 3 rugrats are going to grow up, right? And they're going to leave. and you're going to find out how much disposable income you actually have, because kids aren't cheap. Now, just because they leave, Daren, don't think that the bill goes down, right?
Yeah.
But you're going to make more money, and you've got disposable income that's built into the deal. And all of a sudden, I'm going to send you this statement because Wall Street forces me to send you this statement. And all of a sudden, you see that number, whether it's $500,000 or $1 million. We have a 401k account that's over $2 million, several of them that we manage for people. And all of a sudden, you see this thing, and you've spent the last 20 years of your life saying no to new cars. You drive an old truck, right? You've said no to some of the trips you could have taken with your family. You've said no to getting granite in your kitchen, and you've said no to a lot of things so that you could have this baby. Right?
Correct.
That's what I call the heavy lifting. When you hear me say that, it's you saying no and doing the right things. And now suddenly you get to this point where you've gone through accumulation and then preservation. You've got the big baby, right? And now you get to that point where it's time for distribution. And you kind of look at Morgan and you go, for 40 years, we've put money in. It just doesn't feel right to pull it out, right? This is you feel like you're hurting your fourth child in your case, right?
Yeah.
And that's why people don't take it. And so it's a paradox that we experience as we look at planning. According to the IRS, 70% of America takes Social Security the minute they can get it, which is, believe me, one of the biggest mistakes you can ever make for most people. And then the second part is 70% of those plans, it was 68% in 2016, the last time I saw the documented number. 68% of people didn't touch tax-deferred money until they were forced to by the IRS's hand. Right, so you will exit that plan under three conditions: either your choice, which is why we have defined distribution, or what I like to call designed distribution. Right, you're going to do it under your choice. You're going to turn 72, and the IRS is going to force you, and you're going to be like some of the people that I have in my office that you've seen who cry. One guy asked why an 86-year-old man has to take $160,000 out of an account every year. And because nobody told him that when they started, right? This was not in the memo in 1980 when 401k plans started, right? And then the third is when something happens to you, your heirs are going to have to take it out. So I die, and all of a sudden all this money's passed on. How do Kaylee and Kendra have to take the money out?
Well, if you and Barb are gone, and they receive any IRA accounts, 401k accounts, there's now the 10-year rule, which is new since December 2019 after the Secure Act was passed. What this means now is that there's a 10-year period that account has to be emptied. Now, that could be on day one of the 10-year, it could be on the very last day of that 10th year. The only RMD, if you will, is required at the end of that 10th year. So having a plan to remove any of those assets out of that account or those accounts throughout the 10 years is important, because every dollar that comes out and lands on their tax return is going to add to their taxable income. So if they're high income earners, most of the people that when they receive these accounts are going to probably be in their highest income earning years. And now you're adding in significant amount of taxation just because it's an inheritance from their parents. So it becomes this new game. And what we've heard, and I've heard in many meetings, people are hearing this in different ways. I've heard somebody say you have to take out 1/10 of the account every year, which the math does not add up. As a math teacher, that just annoys me a little bit. And I've also heard that only the growth that the growth does not have to come out. Only the principal of what's been put in has to come out. I've actually heard that in the meeting.
Both of those are wrong.
Exactly. So the importance of making sure people understand, yes, an inheritance is a wonderful thing, but the 10-year rule does matter. And you want to make sure people understand that, because you don't, either if they take it all out at once, that's going to be a big tax hit that year. But over a 10-year period, the account could double. I mean, depending on how it's invested. So now you're dealing with a even bigger tax implication. The IRS could take up to 37% at this point of that account. So having some plan in place for that 10 years is really important.
Is that true for Roth IRAs too?
That is true for Roth IRAs.
So they don't have to pay the taxes, but they still have to do the distribution over a 10-year period.
That's correct.
All right. So this becomes very, very, very important, folks, because we see two things happen with beneficiaries. Either they take the money and they spend it all at once, or they hoard the money. And one of our core values at the Financial Enhancement Group is teaching people how to properly use their money. It's okay if you don't want to spend the money, don't spend the money. I get it, right? So we have people every year who take money out of one account and move it into another account as opposed to spend it on themselves. I'm not telling you to go waste money. What I will tell you is that we will show you the best ways for you to use your money. And I feel a wee bit guilty. 32 years ago, I had people who taught me how to do this, right? Became a certified financial planner, and I learned how to do it. And I think, I don't know if it was when I was at Purdue teaching as an adjunct professor. I don't know when it struck me, but I suddenly started to see these 90-year-old people that I had that had a lot of money and not a lot of life left. And I simply said, this is not what God put me here for. This is not the way it was intended, right? And so we help to make sure that people know how to spend that money. I serve as the trustee, the Financial Enhancement Group technically is the trustee for a lot of IRA accounts, to be able to help your beneficiaries recognize what you've learned while working with the Financial Enhancement Group, how to best invest that money, how to get it out appropriately so that we're taking it out in the right tax recognition to be able to get it out. And remember, in an inherited IRA, and that's what it is, whether it was a 401k before or not, it's deemed an inherited IRA. Remember, you can't convert that your heirs cannot convert that when you're dead. So if it was a Roth, it's a Roth. If it was tax deferred, it was tax deferred. There is no changing that under the current tax code, and I don't see that getting changed.
Yeah. Right. And, the biggest thing that I hear, we see young people, they're putting a lot of money into their 401ks. I would just like to make sure everybody understands that saving money is a wonderful thing, but saving in the right places is so important, and finding a way to make sure that you can control that distribution at the end of your journey is really important.
Think fiduciary focus, right? There's 4 areas and they all matter: risk and volatility, fees and expenses, taxes today and tomorrow, and real return, meaning we got to protect that purchasing power. Pay attention to them. Hey, call 800-928-4001. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. Call Heather. Tell her you want to come in and see us. We'll give you 90 minutes. We'll tell you things you need to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you.